Hockey Illuminati show, let's go. We are coming at you live from the road to the seas, or maybe you're in the skies right now where the brightest star in the galaxy resides. That would be Sirius. You are tuned into frequency number 91 here on Sirius XM NHL Radio. I am your host, Frankie Krupe, former NCAA backup goalie. I played one game in the NCAA. I snuck onto the ice when my coach wasn't paying attention, but that's a story for another day. Here's a story for today. I'm lying in bed with my girlfriend last night, and she looks over at me. And she says to me, Frank, do you think we could go round two? I said, excuse me? She said, round two. I said, honey, do you see that jersey hanging on the wall over there? What is that? That's a Maple Leaf jersey. I know nothing about round two. I can't get to round two. It's not going to happen. Put it out of your mind. No round two. And, naturally, she was very disappointed. She felt strung along. I may have promised something about round two at some point, so she was hopeful. But ultimately, again, not going to happen with that Leaf jersey hanging on the wall. She was upset, but she got over it pretty quickly because she says to me, you know what, Frank, it's okay. My ex-boyfriend was a Buffalo Sabres fan, and he couldn't even get to round one. So the fact you're here, that's all right. I got a lot of respect in the handshake line the next morning. We were making breakfast, so that also worked out well in my favor. But I tell you, I better figure this multiple round thing out quickly, or else, she might leave me for... a Tampa Bay Lightning fan, someone who knows how to get through multiple rounds. So yeah, if this is your first time tuning into the Hockey Illuminati show, welcome inside our brotherhood/sisterhood. We seek to enlighten our audience with divine hockey knowledge. We initiate new members every episode. How do you get initiated? Pretty easy. You can listen, which is what you're doing right now. So congratulations, you're already in the club. You can call in. We can definitely make that happen as well. Or if you played in the NHL or you're somehow connected to the NHL world, maybe we'll do an interview with you. Now, I've interviewed a lot of NHL players, current and former. I'm a fortunate fella. The hockey gods have blessed me with some really exciting, down-to-earth, authentic conversations with hockey players. Heard some crazy stories, some never before heard stories or told stories, I should say, on a mic. So this is a special edition episode. I've compiled some of my favorite moments from all the interviews I've done. You're going to hear from current players like Steve Stamkos, former players like Mike Camilleri, old-timers like Big Daddy Bob McGill, and you know what? I'll probably have a few little surprises sprinkled in as well. And we will get to that very, very shortly, I promise. But before we do so, as it's Hockey Illuminati tradition on the show, we're going to take a few phone calls, right? You wouldn't play a hockey game without warming up first, would you? Well, I guess maybe if you're late for your men's league game and you got to skip warm-up, and then you wake up the next morning and your back is thrown out, you can't get out of bed, you got to call into work sick. We don't want that to happen. We're going to take a few phone calls. The kid's got to warm up, and you're going to help me. You want to vent about something? You got a rant? You got a hot take? You got a question for me? Whatever you want, the floor is yours. Let's kick things off here. We got our first caller. This is John from Vaughan. John, the floor is yours.
Listen, this is a young man's game right now.
Correct. 26.5 is the average.
You got to have speed. I'd like to see Tavares and the Zamboni in a race.
Okay, and who wins that race, John?
It's sad to say, but I'd have to say, because these Zambonis are pretty quick nowadays, eh? They're not quick, they're quicker. I'd have to say the Zamboni. Depends what kind of tires are on it. Okay, so I don't know how he's the best two-way player, one of the best in the game, as people say. I don't know what this guy did in his career because he's done nothing.
Okay, John, that's enough. Thanks for the call. Listen, I get it, okay? I'm a diehard Leaf fan. We've all complained about Tavares at one point or another, myself included. But we're talking about a guy who's pretty much been a point-a-game player for the Leafs since he got here. Like, he's just a hair under a point per game. And naturally, as the captain of a team that has been breaking hearts year after year, yeah, he's kind of become one of the scapegoats. So I get the frustration that is funneled towards him. As far as your comment about the Zamboni beating him, and by the way, the Zambonis are pretty quick nowadays. You're absolutely right. They can move. Maybe he caught the Zambonis doing a lap, during intermissions and looked himself in the mirror and said, you know what? Like, those things are pretty fast. Maybe they could beat me. He worked on his speed in the offseason. Tavares is slimmer and quicker this year, and it showed. He's had a real good start for the Leafs. Is Johnny T a top 10 center in the league anymore? Not even close. He's probably a top 15, top 20 at this point. And that's where a lot of the other frustration comes with how overpaid he is. You want to point the finger at someone about all the money he makes, point it at management. It's not Tavares' fault for taking the money. You can't fault a guy for taking money. Anyways, let's move on to our next caller, who I'm told is an elderly Italian woman named Nina, location unknown. She wants to talk about fighting in the game. Hi there, Nina. You're on the air. Welcome to the show. Do you think that fighting should be taken out of the game of hockey?
No. It's gotta fight. Gotta fight for the leaf, and I love it.
Hey, I'm with you on that, Nina. I love fighting too in the game, but a lot of people think that it's dangerous, right? Like, what if someone gets hurt?
I like it. I'm afraid not to hurt yourself. I pray not to hurt yourself.
I'm glad you're praying for player safety. If it's not too much trouble, maybe you can throw another couple prayers in to the big guy upstairs that the Leafs might win a round or two this year. Thanks for the call, Nina.
Okay, thank you very much, and good luck to you, everybody.
That was cute. Elderly Italian grandmother wants to keep fighting in the game. What side of the fence do you guys fall on? There's a lot of fans that just find it barbaric and not really necessary anymore in this new style of NHL that we have. But you also have a lot of fans that love it. It's entertaining. And, I tell you, I think there is something so sweet and romantic about defending your teammates and your team's honor with your fists. All right, over to our next caller. We have Sarah from Surrey, BC. Sarah, floor is yours.
So I have a message for any former NHL hockey players that might be listening to the show right now. Guys, do not use pictures of yourself playing in the NHL as bait on dating apps. It's way cooler to find out after the fact that you played in the NHL. And I don't want to look you up and find out that you only played 5 games.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, our caller here matched with a former NHL player on a dating app. Sarah, what team did he play for?
I'm not going to say, but my brothers are diehard Calgary Flames fans, so it's probably not going to work out anyway.
Never mind that. Come on, Sarah, your brothers want to know, the audience wants to know, who was the player? No, I think Sarah's gone. Yeah, she hung up. All right, well, if her brothers are Flames fans and they wouldn't be happy with him, he's got to be an Edmonton Oiler. Or I guess a former Vancouver Canuck. If anyone could figure that out, let me know. Who played 5 games and 5 games only with either Edmonton or Vancouver? DM me on Instagram. Okay, let's take one more caller. We have here Cosmo. Cosmo from Thunder Bay. There's a lot of Italians in Thunder Bay. Here's one of them. Cosmo, you're on the air.
Hi, Frank. Thanks for taking my call. So my question for you, do you think that the NHL lags behind the other 4 major North American sports leagues when it comes to marketing their product? For example, I look at the way the NBA and the NFL market their game, and I can see no way that the NHL even comes close to this. And I'm sorry to say, but the NHL is really behind the 8 ball when it comes to marketing. What do you think? Is there anything that the NHL could do differently with regard to marketing its game? I appreciate you taking my call, and I'll take my answer offline. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Cosmo. Good question. So when I look at the way the NHL markets their on-ice product, I think one aspect of the game they've yet to maximize from a marketing standpoint is conveying to the casual fans, conveying to new groups of fans they're trying to convert, is just how fast, incredibly fast NHL hockey is. It is the fastest game on earth, and watching it on TV does not do it justice at all. Anytime you go to a game and you see a game live, one of the first things for me anyway is that always goes off is, wow, I can't believe how much faster these guys are moving in real life as opposed to watching it on TV. And I look at the way that the NHL broadcasts their games, it hasn't changed, right? They haven't changed the way they broadcast a hockey game in decades. I think the NHL would be smart at this point to bring in a different style of broadcasting, bring in different camera angles that do more justice to the blazing speed that NHL hockey is played at. If it was up to me, I would legit reach out to some established, well-known Hollywood producers and say, hey guys, what can we do to better convey to the viewers at home how fast these guys are moving? The NHL needs a marketing campaign around one concept, speed. Speed is one of the major things that differentiates the NHL from all the other sports out there. And you look at the NFL last couple of years, they've brought in some new and interesting camera angles that were not there previously. The NFL spiced things up a little bit. Maybe the NHL should consider something similar. Anyways, that concludes the caller portion of our show. If you were trying to get on and you didn't, better luck next week. And speaking of next week, one thing I'll mention really quickly is that one of the callers we have arranged to join us next week is an astrologer. And we had this individual, a very experienced astrologer, do a reading on all of the players currently rostered on the Colorado Avalanche. We're going to see if we can get some foresight as to what will be happening in their lives in the months of May and June of next year to maybe get a bit of a predictor as to if they will be repeating as champions or not. If you believe in astrology, you're going to want to tune in next week and listen to what this guy has to say. Now, we are going to move on and over to the meat and potatoes of today's episode, which are hand-picked clips from some of my most favorite interviews, which is, again, a little bit different from what we typically do on the Hockey Illuminati show. Usually we bring one guest in for a one-on-one interview. Next week we have Shane Corson join the program, so make sure you tune in next week. But this week is the Hockey Illuminati Best of Clip Show. So let's drop the puck and start the game with a tale of two gladiators from the golden era of NHL fighting. Hopefully Nuna Nina is still listening. She'll really like this. I did an interview with Big Daddy Bob McGill, former tough guy, who's best known for throwing haymakers with the Leafs and Blackhawks in the 80s and early 90s. I asked him who the toughest guy he ever fought was. He had this to say.
Bob Probert was, he was the guy that wore the belt. I think I fought him 6 times. And first time I fought him, it was actually a brawl. We had a brawl in Toronto, like full bench clearing brawl. And I'm there with Probert for 5 minutes by myself. Headbutted me.
So you're fighting with him for 5 minutes?
Yeah. So, of course, after that, then the next time we play, guess what I have to do? Well, I got to fight him, right? One night we're playing in Detroit when I'm in Chicago. And he was famous for, Probert was, where he used to cross-check you in the back, right? Just above your butt kind of thing and knock you off balance. So I'm going back for the puck, and Belfour's coming out to stop the puck behind the net, and I go and he cross-checks me, and I lose my balance, and I go in, and I actually run into Eddie, and we fall down, whatever, and get up. Well, Belfour gets up, and he smokes Probert with the blocker. I drop my gloves, and not a word of a lie, I hit him square, right on the button. He did not flinch. We stay overnight after the game in Detroit. We stay overnight after the game. We get on the bus in the morning, and Probert had got busted at 5 a.m. for the cocaine and whatever. I would probably guarantee you that he was on it, like whatever, because with Belfour's shot with the blocker and my punch, and he didn't even flinch, and it was like, wow. That was the last game he played because he got suspended for the rest of the year and almost the whole next year. And his first game back from his suspension, who they playing? Chicago. Fought him his first game back and whatever. So it was kind of just one of those things where, so needless to say, when I got traded to Detroit and he was on my team, I felt a lot better.
Do you think that it might be a little sad in a sense that fighting has kind of declined in the NHL? Because it's been such a big part of the game for so many years, and now it's really disappearing more and more every year.
Well, it's not so much. It's not even so much that there's no fighting anymore. For me, what I get upset with on a lot of nights is like there's no animosity in the game. Everybody's buddies with everybody. Like last year, I was totally appalled. And hey, these two players are two of the best players in the game today. Outstanding players. But I almost fell off my chair when I saw this. And this was last season. After the warm-up, the players from each team, they're leaving the ice at the end of warm-up, and you go off the bench right into the dressing room, right?
Yeah.
So they both go off at the same time, and they look at each other, and they had a rock, paper, scissors. Tyler Seguin and Mark Scheifele. When I played, some of the coaches I played for, like John Brophy or even Mike Keenan, if you talk to your buddy on the other side during the warm-up, he'd be like in your grill after you cutting deals or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, well, what do you think you're, blah, blah, blah. And like John Brophy, like if he would have saw that rock, paper, scissors thing, he would have went in the dressing room and he would have told the guy to take his gear off because you're not playing tonight. Oh yeah, he would lose his shit for sure. But When you look at the Stanley Cup playoffs, it becomes that so competitive and it's much more physical.
Yeah, it's a way
too.
different game.
It's a different game.
Yeah.
But I find during the course of the regular season, there are some nights you watch games and it's like, well, you don't hit me, I won't hit you. Hey, you're, and everybody's buddies with everybody.
Yeah.
And it starts in the Players Association where, hey, we're all brothers and let's, not hurt each other and let's whatever. And, hey, it's one thing to go out and try and target a guy to hurt them intentionally, but the other thing is to play hard, and I just find that there's you never see anybody get mad, you never and there's games where it's like, wow, I mean, I feel for the fans sometimes, some nights, because it's like, holy smokes, if I had to pull out $300 to watch a game, and some of the games, some nights you're like, holy, I would be some choked, let me tell you. My first 10 years I played, we used to joke about it, but it was the old Norris division. It was called the Chuck Norris division because it was like every team had, it was like there was battle. Fans coming to the game like they knew it was going to be a freaking war.
Yeah.
And it was like, so you could, there would be tension in the crowd because of what might happen tonight, because it's like, oh, these two teams, their rivalry and whatever. You don't get that very often anymore, and it's unfortunate. The bitter rivals of years gone by, certainly there's a different dynamic that way.
That was Big Daddy, Bob McGill, talking about at the end there how the dynamics of the NHL have changed over the years. But hey, what sport hasn't had changing dynamics? Look at the NFL, look at the NBA. They're very different games from what they were in the 80s and 90s. Our next clip is also about change, maybe change that was unwarranted. You're about to hear a clip from an interview I did with Mike Camilleri. In 2012, Mike Camilleri made history by becoming the first NHL player to be traded mid-game from Montreal to Calgary. It came as a shock to him. It was a shock to Habs fans who loved Camilleri. They endeared him. 2012 was the year after the Habs went on that magical run to the third round. I asked Mike what actually went down, and we got some interesting perspective. Check this out.
Yeah, so I'll tell. It's been long enough now I can tell the story.
Yeah, please do.
With a microphone in front of me. I've never done this. That anybody cares anymore.
What do you mean we care?
Absolutely.
Appreciate you saying that. So yeah, so I was. It was after a practice. We were struggling, and I didn't. I've always had the leadership style that has been organic to me of someone who challenges the status quo, and I think there's an effective leadership style that can come with that. But so. It was after a practice one day, and I was talking to two reporters who I actually have a lot of respect for and like in Montreal. We were just talking off camera, and I just said, it's frustrating. I said, I feel like we have this losing mentality, like you said. I feel like we're preparing to lose. We're going to lose games. Like we're playing like losers right now. Mm-hmm. And that's literally all I said.
Like shooting the shit.
Like we were just shooting the shit. And there was a French reporter who was maybe 15 steps away. I don't know if he was even barely in earshot. So we got on the plane to fly to Boston to play in Boston the next day. And I get off the plane and there's this media shitstorm. I guess he had gone on French TV and said Camilleri called his teammates a bunch of
Son
losers
of a bitch.
and said that we're, blah, blah, blah. So the GM calls me in and I said, well, no problem. Like, I'll talk to the coach and teammates. That's not what I said. And so I did. And then I had a meeting with the GM and we talked about some things, and I was kind of candid on about what I thought about, our club and stuff. And the next day he traded me to Calgary during the game.
During the game, that's
Yeah.
right. And you were the first player to get traded in the middle of a game.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, that was wild.
So you're in Boston.
Yeah, we come out for this. It was either a second. I think it was a second period. And so I walked out to go onto the ice, and a guy, I think the assistant coach or trainer, assistant coach grabbed me and pulled me into that other room, and the GM was in the room. And I was thinking, did I turn over a puck or something? Like, what am I talking
what's
about?
going on?
And he's like, hey, I've traded you. I can't tell you where, but I need you to get undressed and go back to the hotel. And okay. So that was it. And there's intricacies that go into this. The assistant GM of Calgary at the time was, and still is, Craig Conroy, who's another one of my best friends in hockey. And we'd played together in LA and Calgary. And so he'd call me, many times when I was playing in Montreal and say, don't buy a house, don't buy a house, don't buy a house. I'm going to get you. And I was like, fuck off. Don't buy a house. Don't buy a house. So I had two homes when he got me. I had to sell Montreal. I didn't believe him.
That's right. And
so I guess I think obviously what happened with the media and that conversation that I had with the GM was probably kind of the tipping point to them saying, okay to a deal they probably had said no to for a year.
Right.
So there's always underlying things that are going on.
Of course, yeah. And speaking of houses, you and your family, you had built a house in Montreal.
We were building.
You were building it.
So I was living in a condo. We had a child, so we decided to build a house by the practice rink. We were building the home, and then got traded. And I never saw the home built. So they completed it, and I put it up for sale, and then sold it. And I've never seen or stepped foot in the house that we built.
That is some wild stuff from Mike Camilleri right there. A game of broken telephone. That's essentially why he was traded from the Habs. Anyways, guys, if you want to listen to any of these episodes in their entirety, just a little reminder that you can find the full interviews with any of the Hockey Illuminati guests just by searching anywhere you would look for podcasts, Hockey Illuminati Show, and we will pop up. You can check those out. One of the other things that Mike mentioned in this interview was that he was a little disappointed that he didn't get selected for the 2010 Team Canada Olympic roster. He was invited to the selection camp, but ultimately did not make the team. One of the players that made it over him was Danny Hot Wheels Heatley. This next clip comes from Corey Warren, anchor with TSN, who I interviewed, and he shares a funny little story about Danny Heatley at the 2010 Olympics.
Danny Heatley was before one of the playoff games at the Roxy one night, and we were there. Danny Heatley's there, and the crowd's starting to get angry, and he's got security guys and stuff with him, and people are like, at first it was like, hey, Danny Heatley's here, cool. Then as the night got on, it's like, shouldn't you be in bed, dude? like you're playing for Team Canada. Get the hell out of here. Yeah. What are you doing? You're still drinking? Come on. Get going. So it's like, it was crazy it was crazy how it turned.
Hot Wheels.
Yeah. And
he is a legend, Danny Heatley.
Yeah. And it was like, and it wasn't before the gold medal game. It was before one of the playoff round games. I mean, I'm sure he would have been more responsible before the gold medal game, but at the same time, like,
but you know what? Put yourself in his shoes. He's probably like, I'm on the fourth line. Look how stacked this team is.
Yeah.
If I'm a little hungover tomorrow, are we still going to beat friggin' Czechoslovakia?
Yeah. Sid and Iggy got this. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
We're good, right?
That is classic. Can you blame Danny Heatley? No, not really. You'd probably do the same thing as well. You think we're passionate here in Canada about hockey? Yeah, we're willing to chase someone out of a bar to make sure they get some sleep the night before a big game. That 2010 Canadian Olympic team that won gold in Vancouver, they were nasty. Nasty, right down to the core, incredibly talented. But you know what? I would still tip my helmet to the 2002 Team Canada Olympic team as being the greatest hockey team ever assembled, at least on paper anyways. 14 Hall of Famers. One of those Hall of Famers, Joe Sakic, is the centerpiece around our next story from an interview I did with Andrew Cogliano. Check this out. Okay, so Andrew, you had a very interesting interaction with your childhood hero, Joe Sakic, the first time you played him in an NHL game, right? Tell us about that.
Well, I remember one game. I don't know if it was my first game playing against him or whatever game it was, but I remember we went into shootout one game, and I remember vividly because he's obviously my favorite player. I remember him standing up on the bench, and he caught my eye, and Sakic kind of said to me, where do I go on him? Dwayne Rollerson, Rolly was our goalie, and I remember, I wasn't shooting in the shootout, so I remember just standing up and I just froze in the moment. I didn't say anything. I looked away or. He ended up shooting. He ended up scoring. And I remember him coming by the bench and winking at me.
And then several years later, general manager Joe Sakic would end up acquiring Andrew Cogliano at the deadline via trade. He brings him to Colorado, and they win a Stanley Cup together. Talk about the circle of life. I think other than anyone wearing a Toronto Maple Leaf sweater, Joe Sakic was my favorite player as a kid growing up. Who was yours? I did an interview with a former NHL referee, Don Van Massenhoven. He reffed about 1,300 games between 2005 and 2014. And here's what he had to say about Andrew Cogliano's childhood hero, Joe Sakic. Who was an absolute gentleman? They always treated you with the utmost respect, no matter what call you made.
Joe Sakic, always.
Why? What you answered that really? You answered that really quickly.
Most guys would have him in the top 3 or 4 in the whole league. Just class act. Joe was always that way, like always still is to this day. Class act, and he'd give him a penalty, and he'd go, "Don, I don't agree with that." But polite. But
That's
Joe
rare.
was number one, and most of our guys that worked over that time frame would put him right up there, I would think.
Burnaby Joe, baby. Legend. Now, again, that was retired NHL referee Don Van Massenhoven you just heard. I'm going to share another clip from this interview that I did with him. And of all the people I've had on a hot mic in front of me, I think the interview I did with Don Van Massenhoven might be one of my most favorite ones. Like, the content was unbelievable. He was just a great interviewee. And this next clip I'm going to share, warning, it is a little graphic. It's going to tug on your heartstrings a bit. But Don was at the center of a very, very unfortunate and scary incident back in 2005 when he was reffing a Panthers-Devils game. There was a power play. Slap shot from the point, deflected off of a stick, and it hit Don square in the face. He almost lost his life that night. Here is the story from his perspective.
First off, I'm in the corner. I'm looking at the net. I kind of turn my head, and then wham, I feel an explosion. My head explodes, and I remember falling forward. I remember kicking but the puck hit me square between the eyes. You can still see the mark. And I fall forward, and I'm kicking, and then I don't know what's happened. I remember the trainer from New Jersey coming out, and Don, are you right? And I'm like swearing and cursing. I can feel the blood in my hands. I go off on my own steam. They help me. They get me off into the room. Now I'm in the room, and I'll always remember they get me on the table, and then there's these people talking to me, and one guy says, I'm the doctor with the Panthers. It turns out his name was Lee Mandel. He did the surgery on me later, but he said, Don, we need to check your face out. There's so-and-so here, so-and-so, 5 names. I'm lying down. They take the towel off. I still have it with my eyes. I don't know if I have vision. And they're talking, and he takes the towel off, and I always remember there's dead silence. Just dead silence. And I said, somebody say something. That he told me later. He'd never seen anything like it. Apparently the puck had hit me so hard, there was an indentation of like a 3/4 inch in of a puck. And then I said, somebody say something. He says, well, we're going to need to take you for surgery. And I said, I figured that. The other part is I don't go in an ambulance because he says to me, Don, if we put you in the ambulance, you've got to go to the nearest hospital. I don't have operating privileges there. Can you ride in a car? I said, I don't care. Get me to the effing hospital. Like, the pain is excruciating. They get me in a car, get my skates off, get me in a car, drive me to his clinic. He calls his partner. It's U.S. Thanksgiving. It was November 23rd. It's the U.S. Thanksgiving. He's at the game with his 3 sons. I find this out later. He doesn't even go to all the games. He's got his 3 sons in the stands. He left them with the usher to come down to help me. They basically saved my life because he calls his partner. He's ENT. He calls his partner who comes in because he said, I'm going to need your help. I get to the clinic, and now they do the CAT scan and everything else, and I'm conscious the whole time. I remember everything. I mean, I'm remembering the pain. He comes out to me and he says, Don, got a bit of a problem. And I said, you're telling me we've got a problem? And now I know my eyes, I can actually look out. My face is swelling, but I know my vision's okay. What's the problem? He said, septum bone in your nose shows that it's pressing against your brain. The dural sac, I might get the wrong terminologies, but that protects your brain is being pushed, and there's a bubble. There's this bubble on your brain. And so what does that mean? He goes, well, 2 things when we go in there. It either we fix it or it bursts, and then there's either death or brain damage. Then he says, you should call your wife. Now, my colleague was at the hospital, Brian Murphy. He had already called my wife to say, Don got hit with a puck. He's probably got a broken nose. He's going in for surgery. I said, Doc, can't do it. He said, what do you mean you can't? I said, what am I calling her to tell her? Like, I'm like literally with my eyes closed telling her, am I calling her to say goodbye? Well, you should talk to her. I said, Doc, she's 3,000 miles away. I'm not talking. I said, but I'll make you a deal. And I went and visited him 2 years ago on the 10-year anniversary. He says, what's that? And I said, you call her in the morning and tell her how great I did. And he goes, that's a deal. And I remember sticking up my hand and shook hands. Go into surgery, and they told me it was going to be 3 hours. I mean, you go in at 11:30. I do remember, and I will swear for this, I'm going down the hall. I'm on the gurney, and that's the first time in my life that I've scared for my life, because I literally said, wake the fuck up, wake the fuck up, wake the... I'm talking out loud to myself because I don't know. Now I go, and then I get Brian Murphy said he came back next morning to see how I made out at 7 a.m. Well, I'm not out of surgery. Now he said, he's told me since. He never talked to me. He said, now he's scared. Now, 7:30, 7:45, I come out of surgery, and then they call my wife. Well, my wife then comes in on the story. She tells me later, like, she gets this call at 7:45 from Brian Murphy. Hey, Don, Chris, I got the doctor, Dr. Lee Mandel. He'd like to talk to you. So she gets on the phone, and she says, how's he doing? And she said, he goes, good. He's going to make it. And she goes, he's going to make it? Yeah, no, he's going to make it. Was his life in danger? Yes. But again, she wasn't mad, but she just said she just started shaking uncontrollably.
Of course.
Then Murph came back on, Chris, it's okay. He's good. He's awake. We've been talking to him. And what do? You come down here. And then, well, I don't know. Just someone's going to call. And 15 minutes later, the next phone call is Gary Bettman.
Wow.
phones my wife to say, you go down there, and she, well, what do I take the whole town of Strathroy? You send us the bill. You just go. So people can say what they want about Gary Bettman, but
He's a class act out there in the day. Guys rag on him, but
yeah, it's not fair.
Just a little reminder there that it's not only hockey players that are tough as nails, the referees are tough as well. What I loved about this story, other than the fact, obviously, that Don was okay, was that it demonstrates again how close-knit the hockey community is. Like, look at all these people that came together and supported Don. The hockey world is tight. It's smaller than people think. And at the end of the day, there's so much respect and so much care amongst all of the peers and colleagues that are in the hockey/NHL world. So what's amazing is Don Van Massenhoven was back about 6 to 8 months later on the ice officiating. One of the highlights of his career came in 2008 when he refereed the inaugural Winter Classic game at Orchard Park between the Penguins and the Sabres. That was the year that Crosby scored the shootout winner with snow flying in his face. I interviewed one of Crosby's teammates from that year, defenseman Hal Gill, another one of my favorite episodes. And he had this to say about Sidney Crosby upon joining the Pittsburgh Penguins.
My first practice there, I remember he was driving wide on me, and he's driving one-on-one, and he'd get lower and lower, and I was going, and so I just finally, almost lifted my leg and let him through my legs. It was really bizarre, but I didn't want to hit him, squash him, and take him into the boards, and so I just let him go. It's Sidney Crosby. I'm not going to hurt. Does that make my first practice? I'm going to go out and hurt him? And he came up after me, and he goes, "What was that?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? I let you go." And he goes, "I know you did. You could have finished me." I was like, "Sid, I'm not going to finish you in practice." And he goes, "We're never going to get better if you play like that." And I was like, "All right." And so from then on, it was balls out, all practice, every day. And I think that's what makes him so good. I remember at one point where Sid wasn't in the lineup and he wasn't in practice, and guys were like, "Oh, good, we can take it easy in practice here."
Well, hey, it's a good thing you guys were listening to Crosby, right? Because all the hard work finally paid off in 2009 when you and the Pittsburgh Penguins won the Stanley Cup. But you also lost in a final the previous year. You're one of the few NHL players that's been on both extremes of the spectrum, having won a final and lost a final. Tell us about that.
You know what? In the end, I think it makes you stronger because you realize how hard it is to get. You've heard the Edmonton Oilers talk about the Islanders back in the day before they took over the throne and started winning their dynasty. They talked about how hard the Islanders worked to win and to beat the Oilers their first year. So I think that is kind of what it's all about. You realize how hard it is to get there, and then you just grind to get back. You do anything you can. And that being said, the next year winning the Cup, you want it even more. You get bloodthirsty, and it's like a bear that tastes human blood. You want more of it. And so I think that definitely motivates you that much more.
And you guys clearly were motivated that much more because you won the Stanley Cup the very next year. Tell us about the celebration that night.
You know what was awesome is, and this is, going back to Mario Lemieux and how awesome he was as a player, as an owner, he had a house party I think we got back at, 3 or 4 in the morning, and we all went from the plane right to his house. And, one of my best memories is sitting in the pool with Mario Lemieux, watching the sun come up the next day.
Wow.
He had a catered, who has a catered party at 4 in the morning? But it was awesome. Just that experience and saying, all right, should we leave now? When do I leave? Because my wife came up to me and was like, "Should we go?" And I'm not leaving Mario's house until he says I have to leave.
I'm moving in.
I'm going to soak this in as much as I can. It was awesome to share that with my teammates and to be there. And then we went to, the nights all blur together. But at one point we were on the main street, south side in Pittsburgh, and we were leaning out a window of one of the bars that we used to go to, Mario's. It was not Mario's house, but Mario's the bar.
Right.
a mess of people downstairs just spraying champagne on them, and out in the street, and there's no traffic. It was just a full-on party, everyone involved. With a smaller city like Pittsburgh, everyone kind of was in on it. There was no ropes up or no elite privilege. It was just everyone was, one group partying together, and it was a good week, I guess, where we are having way too much fun. And
there's no such thing as too much fun after you've won the cup.
You know what? I always laugh because everyone's like, "Wow, look at Ovechkin! He partied like no one else did." And I guarantee you, I looked at it, and I know there's a bunch of other people that looked at it and said, "No, we did a lot more than that." Like splashing in a fountain. Yeah, we did that. I appreciate Ovechkin going out and partying the way he did, but I think everyone did that.
Right.
I mean, it was just whether it was on camera or not is the question.
Exactly.
But I do remember one morning I woke up and my wife was like, "Do you think that's enough?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's probably enough. We got to settle. We got to start living right. Good run, but it had to come to an end, and then it was just about rebuilding and trying to build my body back up after that celebration."
Again, that was the voice of former NHL defenseman Hal Gill you just heard, a.k.a. Skillsy. God, could you imagine floating in Mario Lemieux's pool, using the Stanley Cup as a floaty, watching the sunrise? Like, that is what dreams are made of right there. One of the other things we talked about in this episode with Hal Gill, and again, you can find all of these interviews in their entirety online, anywhere you find podcasts, by searching Hockey Illuminati. But one of the things we talked about in this interview with Hal Gill is just what a fine line it is between being a Stanley Cup champion and not. And it's kind of a shame that so many players have their legacies defined by whether they won a Stanley Cup or not. A guy like Matt Sundin, good example. A guy like Eric Lindros. Henrik Lundqvist. People would say, "Oh yeah, he was a great goaltender, but he never won a Stanley Cup." Well, you know what? There are so many factors that go into winning a Stanley Cup, so many factors outside of an individual contributor's control. Hey, it's the hardest trophy to win in all of pro sports, in my somewhat biased opinion, but maybe not that biased. Like, is there anything that comes close to the 2-month mental and physical grind that is the Stanley Cup playoffs? I don't think so. Now, let's keep the Stanley Cup pedigree flowing and going. Our next clip comes from another Stanley Cup champion. This time, Chris Versteeg, who I had the pleasure of interviewing not too long ago. His individual contribution to the Chicago Blackhawks' first Stanley Cup win in 2010 was 14 points in 22 games. I asked him about that magical, wild, crazy moment that Kane scored the overtime winner, and we didn't know what was going on. Here's the moment through his eyes. The first Stanley Cup, obviously Kane gets that 0-2 winner, one of the more strange championship celebrations in all of sports. Walk us through that exact moment. How long before the team kind of collectively figured out that the puck actually went in the net? That celebration that Kane is doing is not a mistake.
So I remember I just came off the ice. I was kind of had my head down, and those guys go out. I think it was Ladd and those guys. And Brouwer was to the left of me, I believe. I can't remember if it was the left or right, but I remember I had my arm on the boards because I was trying to suck wind, right? Kind of at the same time, you're a little nervous. You're like, "Oh God, we just gave up the lead."
Yeah.
So I'm on the boards and I look up and Kane makes a shimmy shake and he goes down the wall and he shoots it. And all of a sudden I heard thunk and I thought it hit the goalie's paddle and went into the mesh, right? So Brouwer looks at me, he's like, "Where is it?" I'm like, "I think it's in the mesh." And I'm like, and then Brouwer's like, "Well, I don't see it though." I'm like, "I don't see it either." And the puck, and then all of a sudden Kane comes around the net and he's jumping in front. He's like, "It's in the fucking net." And I'm like, "It's in the net." And I'm like, "Where? I don't see it in the net." So we jump off and I see Brow in front of me and he throws his stuff off. And I remember thinking in my head, this fucking thing better be in the net or we're screwed. You know what I mean? So I threw my stuff off. Again, I get down to the end. I start hugging everyone. I'm like, "This better be in the net." It was almost like you're not cheering yet, but you're your gloves are off. And then I look down the ice. And at that time, I still saw the ref. He went in the net. I saw him pull out the puck. A bunch of us saw it. And we're like, "It is in the net." And that's kind of when we kept partying. That's when the whole party, I guess, started.
Yeah, unbelievable. And there's been a lot of really great Stanley Cup celebrations over the years, but the Chicago drought was so long and it meant so much.
Yeah.
The way you guys won that Stanley Cup that year, it was one of those really unique championship teams. encompass what the party was like that night.
It was amazing. I mean, you get off the ice and then you have your family there and you're hugging and you're holding your family. So I remember we were in the room partying till probably 1 or 2 in the morning. We went on the flight that night. We took a flight back to Chicago, and when we got to Chicago, all the firefighters were there and they were shooting water, and the plane was driving through the water. It was a pretty amazing sight. And when we came off, all the fans are there.
Wow,
crazy, man. We got the cup. We went to Harry Carey's, I remember, till probably 4, 5, 6 in the morning. And then after Harry Carey's, I remember we went to this place we used to go to called the Pony. And we were there till probably 8, 9, 10 in the morning. And I remember coming out of the Pony, and I look up and there's helicopters above, like a lot of helicopters above the bar. And they were basically following the limousines home, like telling everyone about the party. Like, these guys are just coming out of the bar. And I remember getting in the limo and the helicopters following guys home. It was a surreal moment. And then a few days later, you have like this parade. I remember you can go on YouTube and watch it, but it had to be 2.5, 3 million people. They said 2 million people on the street, but another 500,000 plus in the buildings throwing confetti.
Yeah.
It was a magical moment, man. It was wild.
Yeah. Crazy. And your sophomore year in the NHL too, right? Like,
yeah, you're like, that's what I mean. You don't really realize when you're in it how big it is.
My next question is, like, a lot of people that have crazy achievements and this wild success, they look back on it when they're older and they say, you know what, I wish I maybe soaked it in a little bit more, was more present and conscious as to what was happening, and instead of just kind of riding the wave. And you got to do it a second time with Chicago, right? So when you look back on those two moments, if you could go back and I guess maybe savor it or experience it a little bit differently, would you?
I would do a couple things different. Not much though. And again, like, I didn't really have, I mean, I don't know, maybe each athlete can speak to this differently. I don't know if sitting around and taking things in, like, I definitely did that when I came to Toronto. I remember, holy man, like, look at all these guys in the rafters. And I remember being in Chicago. I remember my first NHL camp. I remember really trying to soak in those moments, but you also have to be very, I guess your mindset almost has to be screw it to an extent too. I'm here, like, this is me. Like, I deserve to be here. So I think it is about a fine line. Where I really tried to soak it in was the Spengler Cup. I knew that was it for me. I remember before going out to every game, I really visualized myself as a child playing on the street, playing with my parents, playing with my brothers. And I played some of my best hockey at the Spengler Cup. But I remember going out before every game trying to think, like, wow, this is it for me. This is really hard. It's emotional. And I just want to, like, really soak it all in as, like, a hockey player, think about who gave me every opportunity. So that then and there, I think, was a place and moment for me to do it. But as for your career, it's almost like you kind of got to have a hardened mentality where, you take in certain moments like Winter Classics. I took it all in, but the rest you got to be, I guess you kind of got to just go through it in a sense. I don't know. Maybe every athlete can answer it differently.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone's perspective, where they are at that stage in life is different, right?
Exactly. It all comes down to your perspective. I would never try to tell anyone how to feel in their perspective. Teemu Selanne plays 18 years. He wins a cup, He's still killing himself at 35 to win a Stanley Cup, where at 30, 35, I'm laying on a bed talking to you right now. But at 30,
that's pretty good too, though, man. Come on, we're having fun, aren't we?
No, I'm saying this is great, but I mean, at 30, I'd won 2 Stanley Cups, but I'd been through, I had like 6 major surgeries, and kind of at 30, I was like just hoping to get out to practice for 20 minutes, without being in like significant pain and not having to take 4 Advil and 4 Tylenol just to practice. So different mindsets, different perspectives. So that was just my own perspective.
And again, that was the voice of 2-time Stanley Cup champion Chris Versteeg. You just heard. Nice little sound bite there. And yeah, like he says, it's all about perspective, right? And speaking of perspective, this next clip, a very quick one, is going to share with you how one player's perspective of Scott Stevens drastically changed the moment they encountered each other for the first time in an NHL game. You are about to hear the voice of former Maple Leaf Nick Antropov, whose perspective on Scott Stevens may have changed just a little bit after this.
First year, actually, obviously I didn't know he was one of the top hitters in the league, or toughest guys in the league. Playing against him at home, so dumped the puck in his corner, and I just like rammed him, right, like as hard as I could, right, like literally hold him like this and just scrape him on the,
Oh, man.
on the boards and stuff. So it was pretty hard hit. So you come up, start kind of saying something, obviously no English again. And then Yuskevich come up to me on the bench and goes, keep your eyes open for the rest of your career, I guess, but don't do that again to this guy. I'm like, why? Like, well, just don't do it. And then it was the years I learned, right? So all these highlight hits on Lindros and this.
Yeah.
I'm like, holy shit. Like,
Oh, no.
None of your teammates warn you about him?
not until I did something.
Not until you did something, right. And did he ever get you back?
I don't think so, no. We had a couple of good, big battles, but nothing like.
Scott Stevens was an animal. I tell you, they just don't make him like they used to. Anyways, if you're a Maple Leaf fan, make sure you check out that Nick Antropov interview in its entirety. It's definitely one of my favorite all time. Now, for our last clip, and yes, this is our last one. We're running short on time, my friends. This last clip comes from an interview I did with Steve Stamkos, who happens to be a buddy of mine. Yes, I'm very fortunate to call Stammer a friend. We went to high school together. We still play in the same fantasy football league together. There's so much great content in the full-length interview that I did with him. This clip I'm about to share with you is going to make you laugh. That's why I chose it. So a little preface before you listen to this. So we're like 19 or 20 at a house party one summer. I think this was after Stammer's rookie year. So we're at this house party, and the boys are getting rowdy, and we're getting hungry, and Stammer offers to drive the boys to McDonald's, being the responsible professional athlete that he is. He wasn't drinking. He was the DD. So we load up in Stammer's car, and he takes us to the local McDonald's, and yeah, I'll let Stammer take it from here.
Yeah, it was probably maybe 1 or 2 in the morning at that time, and I know a couple people were getting hungry at the thing, so they're like, okay, well, how are we going to get McDonald's? I'm like, okay, I got my car, I'll drive, I haven't been drinking. So I drive these guys, and, you know, everyone's drunk and rowdy in the back, we're having a good time, and we go through the McDonald's drive-thru, and then we pull out of McDonald's onto the set of lights, and there's no one on the road at that time, right? And this light is taking forever.
It was a major intersection.
Yeah, major intersection.
Highway 7 in McAllen, I believe.
And this light is taking forever. And I got these guys chirping in the back. And I'm like, screw it. I'm just going to make a Yui at these lights. There's no one around. I'm sick of waiting at this light. And I asked the guys, and this is something that is just crystal clear in my mind. I'm like, because I can't see out of my rearview mirror because there's 3 knuckleheads sitting in the back.
Yeah.
So I'm like, just do a quick check. Any cops around? And the guys go, no, you're good.
No, you're fine, Sam. Don't be a pussy. Do it.
So
Great friends you are.
Oh, yeah.
A Yui at the light, and I'm halfway doing my Yui, and I look back, and there was a cop fucking right behind us. Like, right behind us at the light. There's no other cars on the street, just us and the cop behind us. And I'm like, you motherfuckers. How do you not see that there's a cop sitting behind us? So I make the Yui. Cherries come on.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So I get, and now I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, I know I didn't have a drink, but I'm like, shit, did I have a beer? Did I not have? Like,
yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm
questioning
good.
life.
You just start, you panic sets in. And I got these guys in the back. So we get pulled over, and the officer goes like, really? Like, what the hell were you guys doing? Oh, sorry, officer. He goes, you're going to have to step out of the car. I'm like, oh, shit. Like, am I going to have to do the DUI test? Like, what's going on
now?
I
remember something funny, too, though. Sorry to cut you off. I think the car you're driving, was it a Florida? Was it your...
Yeah.
So it had Florida plates, but you had a Markham driver's license. Or sorry, Markham, an Ontario driver's license.
Yeah.
And I remember because I was sitting, I think I was in the front. The cop said, so you have a Tampa car, but you have an Ontario license plate? And you said... Yeah, I live in Toronto, but I work in Tampa.
Yeah. I didn't want to just come out and say, I probably should have at that time, but somewhat courteous to the cop.
So he takes him to the back.
So he takes me, and we start walking like towards his cop car. Yeah. And again, he's like, why the hell were you making that? Yeah, I'm like, oh, sorry, officer. You know, we're tired of waiting at that light. I asked the guys, maybe they were playing a joke on me. There was a cop, like, you guys are sitting right behind. I know it looks stupid. And he's like, finally, he just starts laughing. And he's like, oh, you had a great year in Tampa this year, and like starts talking hockey, and I was like, oh, thank God.
Thank God, yes.
And then it, like, again, I don't know if that makes it better. Like, he still thinks I'm an idiot for making that Yui with him right there, but he
But you had a good year.
What? Yeah,
exactly.
he had a good year. And
didn't he call for backup?
Yeah.
And say, hey, I just pulled Stammer over?
Then he got on the thing, and then this other car came, and like they were big hockey fans, which I was lucky, and they kind of just laughed at me, and I'm like, okay.
And meanwhile, we are in his car for 40 minutes. And we were like, oh my God, is he getting a cavity search? Like, what's going on? We see another squad car pull up. We're like, holy shit. But
it was bad.
It worked out. That was really funny. Speaking of funny, true or false, your first NHL point was a phantom assist off of a Vinny LeCavalier goal.
I think that's true. I do. I mean, I was so happy I got a point in Toronto, but it might have, if it nicked me, it nicked me. But I wasn't expecting an assist on that. But you take them whenever you can get them.
Exactly.
So what other lies in your career do you have?
There might have been a few in junior before instant replay was there. No, I tipped it. Yeah, I swear. But the karma train kind of got me a little bit because when I scored my first NHL goal in Buffalo.
The next night, wasn't it?
I think it might have been the next night or 2 nights later. I tipped one in front, and the whole game they had the goal to Vinny. And it was like, I thought it was pretty clear that I tipped it, and they're like, oh no, but we looked at it. So like, finally they changed it.
Yeah.
But I didn't know the whole. I'm like, I scored, guys! I scored. I was like,
finally did it.
Yeah, exactly.
Did it.
So it kind of got me. They got me back, but they changed it, and it was all good.
Amazing stuff there from Steve Stamkos. Guys, if there's one takeaway from this show, it's this. If you're going to pull a Yui, turn your head around, make sure there's no cop car sitting right behind you. Even if your buddies tell you that you're in the clear, double check yourself. Always check yourself before you wreck yourself. My Hockey Illuminati brothers and sisters, this concludes another chapter in the saga of our show. But we will be back next week and back to our regular format, full-length feature interviews. We have Shane Corson joining us for a full-length feature interview. We also have an astrologer calling in as one of our callers again, who's going to do a reading on the Colorado Avalanche. We're trying to see if they're going to repeat as champs or not. Anyways, thanks for tuning into the show and listening to Sirius XM NHL Network Radio Channel 91. I am Frank Krupe, and we'll see you again next time.